Hello, everybody. Happy lunchtime on this Friday. It's Friday. Oh my gosh. The week is over. It went by really fast. Welcome to The Reason We Learn. And one second, my computer is acting up here. Okay. So as people are coming into the show, I would like to welcome you if this is your first time to the channel. I hope you will consider subscribing because this is a channel where you will find videos and live streams about education, the crisis in American education right now, but also ideas about how to educate your kids outside the system if you would like to do so, or how to help them and supplement them while they're getting through it. I try to educate parents, teachers, administrators, concerned taxpayers. That's what I do here. If that's of interest to you, please consider subscribing, hit the notification bell to be notified when I make new videos. I also have a locals community, thereasonwelearn.locals.com. We have 2 Zoom calls a week where we talk in depth about these issues, and I offer more face-to-face help if you're trying to homeschool your kids in particular. And you can also come on the channel if you have something to offer to my audience. And so today, I am privileged to have with me a mom, a parent, who has gone head to head with the system. She is a fighter. She is now a voice, I think, for all of us about fighting for transparency, fighting for parental rights. Please help me welcome Nicole Solas. Did I say it right, Solas?
Yes, yeah, Solas. Thank you.
Welcome to The Reason We Learn. Could you please introduce yourself to my audience and help us understand how you came to this fight?
Yes. So I'm a stay-at-home mom. I live in South Kingstown, Rhode Island, and I enrolled my daughter in kindergarten, which is a very exciting time. She's my firstborn. And when I did, I asked the school if they were teaching critical race theory or gender theory. I called the principal. And, I had other questions too, but that question really kind of just turned my life upside down. It turns out that they do teach critical race theory. Maybe they don't call it critical race theory. And they teach gender theory. And the principal said that they embed the values of gender identity into the classroom. And they don't call children boys and girls. They refrain from using gendered terminology. And this is starting in kindergarten.
And this is a public kindergarten.
Public kindergarten, right.
Taxpayer-funded public kindergarten.
Right. And for critical race theory, they said that they, for example, in kindergarten, ask kids when they're learning about the first Thanksgiving, what could have been done differently on Thanksgiving, which is a really terrible question. I don't know how a 5-year-old answers that. And it's obviously meant to shame them for their American heritage. And then the principal said that they have a certain line of thinking about history that they teach students in every grade at an age-appropriate level. When I asked what exactly that was, like, well, what else do you do with gender theory in school? What do you do in every grade? What do you do with anti-racism? And how are you teaching that in every grade? They told me to submit public records requests. So she didn't want to answer my questions on the phone.
So you were just very forthright, went straight to the school, straight to the source, as I've been advocating on my channel to do, start there. And they were gatekeepers, just like, we're not going to answer you. Did they give you a reason why they weren't going to answer you and they wanted you to file the FOIA requests?
Yes. So when I was asking specific questions on the phone, the principal was like, well, I don't have all the answers. For example, she called the gender ideal stuff common practices. And I said, well, what's a common practice? And how long have you been commonly practicing this? I don't know. So I said, well, when can you let me know? We agreed that I would send an email with a list of questions. And we agreed that, okay, they're testing right now and she'll get back to me at this certain time. So I was being very reasonable in getting my questions answered. And then when she got the email, she said, well, due to the scope of your questions, meaning because you have so many, and I think it was a list of like 25 questions, please submit public records requests. So she knew I had a lot of questions, and they directed me to this legal process to get my questions answered.
And did that cost you money, or were you able to do that for free?
Well, public records requests, when you submit them, are free, but you will then get an estimate back on how much it costs to get public information, which is, really amazing, because why can't you just answer my questions in an email, even if it's going to take a little bit of time? Now they want to charge me money to get this information. So I submitted my public records requests. And when they thought that I submitted too many public requests, they threatened publicly to sue me for submitting the public records requests that they told me to submit. Now, I found this out on my own. One day, they just put my name on the agenda of the next school committee meeting, and it said, discussion action, filing a lawsuit against Nicole Solas for submitting over 160 public records requests. So they didn't warn me. They didn't call me and say, hey, we noticed you're submitting all these requests. Maybe we can have a meeting with you and help you understand answers to your questions. They just did it to target me and bully me and harass me because they didn't want to answer my questions about critical race theory and gender theory in the district.
And for people watching, oh, now I hear That's weird. For people watching, one of the reasons the school committee would take that up is that school committees do have the control over legal, budget for legal action. So if somebody's going to be suing the school district or the school district wants to sue somebody else, they do have to go, they conduct this district's business and the district's budget. So they have to go through the school committee to get that approved. But it's clear in this case to me that they were trying to use both the public platform that the school committee occupies, because they have to hold all their meetings in public, to shame you. So that none of this, like you said, they didn't call you on the phone and say, we're thinking of doing this. So they were obviously waiting to get into a public platform to use that whole community shame to get you to back down and bully you. And then to have you be more afraid they were going to have the deep pockets of the district budget, which of course is going to be bigger than yours. Ideally would elicit anger from the people, the taxpayers in the district, like, wait, you're going to use our money to sue a parent. But they were hoping it would go the other way. And that is a power that school boards do have. So I've been telling people they don't control curriculum because they don't, but that they can do.
Right.
They can do for sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry.
Yeah, you're right. They can decide to sue you. They can have a whole public meeting talking about you and villainizing you, which is what my school did. Mm-hmm. They had a 5-hour meeting talking about me, who was a nobody. I mean, I'm not active. I wasn't active in my community. I was just getting started to, participating in my community because now my daughter's enrolled in school. I had never even been to an in-person school committee meeting. And I mean, can you just imagine how going to your first school committee meeting, enrolling your 5-year-old daughter in school, and now your own public school is actually trying to ruin your life? I mean, they were trying to ostracize me from my community and put a target on my back just because I asked questions.
Yeah.
I mean, it was vicious, and it was truly a show trial. So they had all of my public records requests cast onto a big screen. They organized them in terms of different categories. They had people speak in public comment calling me racist just for asking these questions. And it was, I just sat there I can't believe this is happening. I mean,
it must have been surreal.
Surreal. I had to bring an attorney with me. I paid thousands of dollars for, my own attorney to come with me. My husband was also targeted. They put up his public records request on a big screen and even put in parentheses husband of Nicole Solas. I mean, and keep in mind, public school is the government. This is the government having this show trial in a school cafeteria where, people are either shouting, supporting me or booing me. And it's so it was just surreal that I couldn't believe that this is what public school does.
So to give us an idea, and I know there were about 25 questions, but then you also had a lot of public record requests. And for those who aren't familiar, it tends to translate that way because one question about something then has to be extrapolated across all different kinds of material. And when you're filing a public records request or talking about a record, and you have to be very precise, right? You have to be very specific about the record, or you'll miss a lot of things. Things can get put into one record that really, that is what you're looking for. So it ends up being like hundreds, right, of public record requests for really just to answer 25 questions. So give us like a sampling of 3 or 4 of the questions you were trying to answer so people understand that this is like pretty reasonable stuff that you wanted to know about your child's education, especially because this comes on the heels of you called and you were told something was common practice that, to your knowledge, not being very old, right? You're like, wait, no, you're like, I don't remember it. And I don't even remember hearing about it recently. So what's a sampling of some questions so people understand?
So first of all, just to clarify, one of the reasons why I submitted a lot of public records requests is, like you said, you have to be very specific, but also because it can be so expensive, I had to submit very narrow, small requests. I had to ask for like one thing at a time, hoping that in one request it would only come back as like $50, and then I could, purchase that answer. But if you put everything into one omnibus request, it's going to come back for like, $75,000, which, fast forward a little bit, that actually did happen when when the Goldwater Institute resubmitted requests for me. So one of the requests I submitted was, what is the definition of equity? What is the definition of anti-racism? Because they keep talking about these words, and I don't think parents really know what they mean. And if everything is, flowing from this concept of equity, well, where is the official school district definition? Like, what is that? One thing schools are doing equity audits, right? They want to audit the curriculum under the lens of anti-racism, which is really just racism. And then they want to change the curriculum and policies. So I said, well, what are the metrics and for an equity audit? Like, what is an equity audit? What are the parameters of an equity audit? They come back with, no responsive documents. Well, how can you do an equity audit if you don't have any public documents even saying what an equity audit is and how you do it? So does that answer the question of like the things that I said?
No, that's great, because when I think about, you're in Rhode Island, and then I think about New York, and like, I'm in North Carolina, but for all its flaws, and they are myriad, the New York Regents have a crystal clear definition of equity right at the tippy top that anyone could look up on their website. It's horrifying. I mean, it's not something you want to read, but at least it's there. Right? But it seems like a small thing. Like, you're going to pepper everything with this word, and you're going to use this word when speaking to my child. Since it's not a word we all understand to mean something like that's the color yellow. I mean, it could be interpreted different ways. I want to know how you're going to use that word. And
right. And I think it's, you really got to pin them down on definitions, because they're taking advantage of people's ignorance. Someone's going to think equity means equality. Well, before we can even have a conversation and a debate about the merits of equity, we need to all agree that we're talking about the same thing. Exactly. Another request I submitted was evidence of systemic racism in the South Kingstown School District.
Right.
I mean, they keep saying unequivocally that our school district is systemically racist. Well, prove it. Show me the evidence. They came back with, your request is unclear. Really? Because like their declaration of systemic racism was crystal clear. Why is me asking for evidence of that unclear? And to follow up with that, I asked for data of racist incidents in the school district in the past 10 years. Okay, well, if you're not going to give me the evidence, I have to submit a public records request to try to get the evidence myself. And, that's a good faith request, because it's like, well, maybe my school district is racist. Maybe I got to see the data that everyone's been reporting racist incidents all the time. So that's how I went about it. And I think it was so infuriating to them that I followed through with what they told me to do. I think that they thought that I would just be giving up, if I got back answers that said no responsive documents. It's like, oh, okay, well, I gotta go. I gotta continue, my life. So.
Yeah, the gatekeeping process is a process, and they start with, a certain way to push you away. And if that doesn't work, then they want you to jump through bigger and bigger hoops, more expensive hoops, more time consuming hoops, because they know most people either can't or won't do it.
Right.
And so that kind of lets them continue to not know the answers. And what I keep saying to people is, you've got to look at it this way. Either they truly don't know the answers, and they're continuing to use words and put things in the curriculum and teach stuff to kids that they don't understand just to go along to get along, or they are willfully deceiving parents. Like they absolutely do know and they don't want you to know, and they're trying to keep it a secret. So I don't think either of those things is acceptable. It's like not like one's better than the other. They're both pretty bad. They're
Yeah.
both pretty bad. In fact, I think I'd rather have them say, we're trying to make your child believe this, and here's what it is.
Right. I mean, at least say like, look, this is what we believe. We have this ideology and this is what we're doing. But I think the reason why they don't do that is because they know it's controversial. It's very much like imposing a religion. And, it's fine. Everyone that has their own religion thinks that their religion is the best for them. But that you're not supposed to impose that on other people. And the school is so morally absolute. They think that their, quote, religion of critical race theory is superior to all other viewpoints of the world.
Right. And did you ask any questions about other parts of critical theory? So well, you did ask about gender. We know that. So that's also, did you ask about anything to do with like surveys or, social emotional learning stuff, or did you discover that after the fact?
I discovered that after the fact. I wasn't aware of how social emotional learning works with critical race theory. It's, I just recently learned that it's the vehicle to implement critical race theory. What I did ask about was the transgender policy that my school district has. So my school district has a policy that was implemented in 2017, and it permits the school to assist in the gender transition of children without parental consent.
Right.
So your kid can go to school, that's a girl, tell the school they're a boy, and the school will get a whole machine going to help them be a boy at school and keep it a secret from you. I told my school that was illegal. They can't do it. To please put it on the agenda to review it. Of course, they did nothing. But when I found that policy, I then submitted a request for the number of transgendered students in the district because, I think if there are transgender students, it's very small and it's disproportionate to have such a broad policy over such a small amount of students. And I wanted to know the number of transgendered students that did have gender transition assistance without parental notice and consent.
Right.
They just came back and said, well, that's private, but that's wrong. It's not private. I'm asking for numbers. I'm asking for a data set. So then I filed a complaint with the Attorney General saying that they're obstructing information because I'm not asking for private information.
Right. Now,
so go ahead.
I'm sorry. I'm curious, and I bet my audience is, what is your background? What is your own background, just to, that you brought to this? And anything, or was this completely outside your wheelhouse? Like any of this?
No, I'm a lawyer. I chose to stay home with my kids. Okay. So, I understand for some people engaging the government is intimidating. And, but, I think if you go to law school, you kind of see through all the baloney and you're not intimidated by something like this.
Right. Which may also account for, if they knew that about you, that may also have accounted for why they push back so hard. They might have felt like, we better because she's got skills.
I have no idea. I don't know if they knew. I don't know if it matters.
Yeah. Who knows?
So hard-headed, they would just do what they were going to do.
Right. But wow. But that's not to say that one needs to be a lawyer.
Correct.
To do these things. I think you've set an excellent example that these are, questions and they're procedures, but I think you've also exposed how hard they will work and what lengths they will go to gatekeep and prevent parents from seeing this. So did it surprise you, not just that they went that far, but did it surprise you to be seen as the enemy by the schools?
I didn't think they were going to go that far. I thought that we would just sort of quietly bicker. Maybe we would have private meetings, but it surprised me that they went to the national news and hired a PR firm to write a defamatory statement about me and read it on Fox News. I mean, when that happened was really the moment when I thought, I can't stay in this district, because that struck me as psychotic to do that to a parent asking questions. That was something to try to not only destroy my life in the community, because we all know that being accused of racism can make you lose your job. And, we're in such a hysterical time right now. I just couldn't believe that they did that on the national news. I was like, oh my God, this is
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it seems almost like they wanted to make an example of you
Yeah,
because they didn't want you to be an example for other parents,
I
perhaps.
think so.
Which
Yeah.
makes me wonder to what degree the national organizations, like the unions and things like that, were involved, because why would they concern themselves at the national news level with a Rhode Island mom of a
Yeah,
kindergartner?
well, the teachers union actually had an NEA member on my school board. So unfortunately, she was voted in. She belongs to the NEA in Rhode Island. The NEA, which is suing me, which I know we didn't get to yet.
Yeah.
And I think in my district and in a lot of districts, the teachers union is in bed with the school board. I mean, you don't really have a school board; you just have a school board that's a shill for the teachers union. It's really just a branch of the teachers union.
Well, let's talk about that. Let's talk about the lawsuits, or is it suit singular, suit plural, suits plural? What's
I think it's just one
it's
now.
just
Thank
one now?
God.
Okay. So
Okay.
so what happened next? So then they threatened to sue you. There you were. They're like putting all the stuff up at the school board, and then what?
Right. So they voted not to sue me. And then I think a month or so later, a constable comes to my door with a lawsuit from the teachers union, now suing me to get a judge to prevent the disclosure of information from my public records requests. They want declaratory relief saying that I cannot get the information that I requested.
On what grounds?
Well, on no grounds, actually. They don't have a legal basis for this lawsuit. They don't even have standing to bring the lawsuit, which means that they're an outside party under the law that doesn't have a right to sue me at all. Because when you submit public records requests, the only right of action that can arise is either by me, the person making the request, or the school. So now the teachers union comes in, and now they are saying, I can't get my public information because they're afraid that their teachers might be harassed. Of course, no one wants anyone to be harassed, but what they are asking for is really just special treatment. They don't want information coming out about teachers that may be teaching critical race theory. And now they're making this emotional plea of, oh, well, if this is public, our poor teachers will be harassed by national conservative groups.
Interesting. Yeah, but you can't really sue someone about something that might happen in the future. I
Right.
mean, even if you had standing, that would be a tough nut to crack.
Right, exactly. I mean,
Yeah.
these are government employees. They're subject to public scrutiny. And public information is public information. Everyone has a right to it. Every parent has a right to know what their kids are learning in school. And you're right, you can't just prevent public information from coming out because you're afraid of someone's feelings being hurt.
Yeah, I mean, people can do a whole lot of things that you might say things, and when they break a law, then you'll have to deal with it. But we don't have precognition in the law. Like, we don't do that. So okay. So where does that suit stand now? So now but you still have to like spend money and time to deal with their nonsense. They're almost harassing you in that process.
In this case, my lawyer, who is the Goldwater Institute, they're representing me pro bono. So thank God nice. I don't have, hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees. Really, that would
maybe. So everybody go now and donate to the Goldwater Institute.
Yes, I mean, they really are standing up for parents here. Check out the Goldwater Institute. They actually have a model policy to get transparency into schools. And they actually have one too for school boards. So they have one for your state legislature, and then they have another that you can bring to your school board and say, hey, I want this passed, where you have to be fully transparent about everything you're teaching my kids.
Oh, that's fantastic. I'm so glad you just told us that. I'm looking up for the Goldwater Institute. I meant it when I said that because I really want to get the word out about organizations that are providing constructive relief and aid to parents in your situation, even to teachers, like teachers who have been disciplined or lost their job because they stood up for kids. I mean, that those people exist, or they're afraid to tell the truth about anything from IDEA not being followed to critical race theory in the classroom where it's not supposed to be. And they're afraid because it will really hurt them.
Right.
So whenever there are organizations that are that are trying to help. I want to put that front and center. So, okay, so
Okay.
that's what's been going on. And then what else have you learned? What else can you tell us about since you've started this
Well,
process?
sorry, I forgot to fully answer your question about
Oh,
the lawsuit.
okay.
We have an anti-SLAPP answer. So now we are saying that we want compensatory and punitive damages because the teachers union sued me frivolously just to bully and harass me. And Rhode Island has a really strong anti-SLAPP law. It stands for anti-strategic litigation against public participation. So you can't sue someone because they were participating in matters of public concern, which is exactly what the teachers union did to me. They tried to, punish me with a lawsuit for exercising my civil right to access public information, and now they're in trouble.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. That's just fantastic. I'm so happy that you're doing that. And what is so great about that, other than the, I would like to believe likelihood that you'll win, is that puts it right back out there. Hopefully that will make them think twice about pulling a stunt like that again, with another parent. So I hope people watching take heart, and listen from these examples that you should not feel intimidated when you are just trying to participate in, things that are of public concern, like Nicole is saying. Asking questions, submitting requests, and I also want to mention, Nicole, that you followed a procedure that I have been advocating for on this channel. A lot of people have been going and just screaming at school boards, right? And it's somewhat cathartic to watch them and so forth. But I think the process that you followed would be, and being that you're a lawyer, would do that. That's the proper process. You start a paper trail, first of all. You are going to the source of the information, and then you're gradually escalating when you don't get your answers. That is the I hesitate to word the correct, but it is the correct way to go about it. I don't know that it'll be effective any more than it was for Nicole, but it is the best way to go about it if you anticipate there's going to be gatekeeping, because then you're holding more of the cards. Am I correct in saying that? You have the paper trail and so forth.
Right. I did everything in email. So I have emails from the superintendent, the principal, the school committee, which was very useful when I had to substantiate my claims in the media. So you want a paper trail, you want emails. If you're going to talk on the phone, record the phone call. Check in your state to see if you can do that without consent. Rhode Island is a one-party state, so I can record other people's conversations without their consent. And the whole tactic is gathering evidence first, and you can do that with public records requests and emails where you're eliciting statements from your school officials and your school leaders. And then you want to take that evidence to a place like the Goldwater Institute or Southern Legal Foundation, who I now discovered on Twitter, and they're doing great work to file lawsuits for parents. And then you want public interest firms like that to challenge the policies of your school on existing anti-discrimination laws, civil rights laws, because we have the laws already. We just need the right way to sue them,
Right.
And,
Right.
I wish lawsuits weren't, what we have to do, but in this case, it's what we have to do because we need to establish legal precedent saying that we can't indoctrinate our kids because it's violating our civil rights.
Right. And in a way, as much as we all complain about being a litigious society, it's still, in my opinion, preferable than heavy-handed pre-enforcement. So in other words, the school would like to, and the school actually is a form of compulsory, like they're deciding in advance that all parents are not going to educate their kids. They've decided that. That's what public school is. That's why it's compulsory. That's why you're forced to pay for it, is they made a decision 100 years ago that parents could not be trusted. We're not going to wait and, either file complaints or prosecute or deal with individual cases of abuse. We're going to treat all parents as abusers and thereby prevent abuse. So the flip side of that, of course, is, we wouldn't necessarily want the state strong enough to go in and micromanage every teacher and micromanage every school and we think we would, but in today's day, we'd be like, oh, I wish they would do that, but you really wouldn't. And that's part of why a lot of good teachers left teaching years ago, is they felt like they had no professional autonomy. It's also why unions are so strong. Professionals who see themselves as individual professionals don't really want to be in a union, right? It's those who kind of want to be in a big protective club. And so they don't want autonomy. They want someone else telling them, like, this is all you have to do. So I think there's life is about trade-offs. And I still think I'd prefer to have it this way, where we have to follow the law and we have to go through these legal processes, than have it be like how the state is saying, you're all abusers, we're going to find you all guilty.
Right.
It's just unfortunate that the government is the one right now with the power.
Right. And yeah, I agree with you. I think the thing is that this legal process is at least transparent. We can have an open debate about a particular issue in a lawsuit. We can have our day in court.
Right.
And, the social contract says that once that's established, we all adhere to this new rule. So it is effective, or at least it can be effective. I guess, it's slowly becoming less and less effective, but I think we need to take advantage of the tools that we have in our American tradition.
Right. Now, the sad thing, though, is your case and everything that you've been doing is about getting information about what they are doing. I think when parents come to me, they're saying, but how do I make them stop doing what they're doing? And unless what they're doing is specifically violating your child's civil rights, you can't. That's the tragedy, is that there's tons of precedent that says that the state has control over what the curriculum is going to be. And only if that curriculum violates the law explicitly, right? Like compelled speech and things like you're talking about, where it's borderline religious indoctrination, and you have to prove it. That's the thing, you have to prove that it is. They can teach all kinds of bad ideas.
Yeah, which is why I think school choice is really the answer. But without school choice, you are being forced into an indoctrination camp. It's so depressing to think that your state can make your child think in terms of race when they look at their friend at 5 years old. That should be something that you have power over to say, you know what, I just don't like that. And I don't want to have to need a lawsuit to not want that. But you're right. We need to have a lawsuit. It needs to be almost extreme. So maybe schools are, they're like getting away with it by having this sort of soft totalitarian approach where you can't quite get them sometimes.
Right. Because they know they've got the dollars captured, and therefore the kid captured to a large degree. There, some people always will be able to say, I'll let that go. Like I'll go do what I have to do. I'll homeschool, did you switch to private school, right?
I did. Yeah. I'm in a private school, and I asked them if they were teaching critical race theory or gender theory. And they said no. And they explained, why they don't believe in it. And it's really wonderful and easy. I didn't have to go through any trouble.
Right. But that's something that, every parent should be able to choose, right? It's your child and your dollars, and you should be able to do that, right? That's what you mean by choice. So like real choice, where you just pick and if there's a public option, we talked about this before the show. If you guys at your city or your town, you want a public option, super, but make it competitive. Like in other words, they have to win you over.
Yeah. The money should follow the student. In my case, it's not easy for me to send my kid to private school. We didn't plan on it financially, but I can swing it. A lot of people can't. And that's really sad that people are sort of being punished because they don't make enough money to have their kids learn their own family values and not have that be corrupted in a public school. Right. So school choice, by not having school choice, you're really just further harming the people who are already vulnerable in the public school system. Public school is always touting itself as helping the most vulnerable and, disparately impacted populations, but they're really just making it worse by imprisoning those poor kids in school. In Rhode Island, we actually have a moratorium on charter schools, a 3-year moratorium. So now kids are trapped in public school. And I read an article saying that they acknowledge that there are more positive outcomes when kids go to charter school in my state, but they still want to trap them in public school because they want the institution to keep the money. So they make no bones about, where their priorities lie. It lies with the institution and not with the kids.
That's amazing. And
Yeah.
to what degree was your daughter aware of any of this going on or not? I mean, she was supposed to go to kindergarten this year, right?
Yeah,
And
she
did you
has no
very
idea.
quickly make the change? Did you quickly realize like this is going to take too long? We're going to get her into the private school and keep on keeping on, or how did you?
Yeah. Once they called me racist in the national media, that's when I like started getting. I got a tour, and just got her out of there as soon as I could. So.
Okay. Yeah, but that's I mean, that's good that she wasn't really like aware of what was going on. But, I know for some kids who've been through this, they are sort of cognizant of like things are not quite rosy and what's happening. And that can be upsetting for them as well. Another
Yeah.
reason I've suggested to people, and maybe you agree, that if you put yourself out there publicly, like in a school board setting first, you're inviting backlash on yourself and your child, especially if they're in the system, where the private records requests and the private meetings and the private stuff, contains that more. It doesn't prevent it completely, but it keeps it a little more contained.
Right. I mean, the main reason why parents don't do what I did is because they're afraid that their kid will become a target in school, that teachers and administrators will be like, oh, yeah, you're so-and-so's kid. Okay, I'm going to have a grudge against you. And in my case, I knew that could happen, but I also knew that, well, she's in kindergarten and no one knows her yet, and I can put her in a different school if I have to. So you do have to assess your own position and what are the risks that you're willing to take. But also remember that retaliation isn't the end if it happens to you, and you can overcome it. And, there's always another day. Like, it's so hard because I don't think anyone's coming out of this unscathed. You're going to be in conflict with your school. Your kid might feel it. But at the end of the day, it's worth this fight because it's their education, it's their values, it's really your whole country, that's at stake here, because this is a cultural revolution. And I think people are just starting to wake up to that.
Right. And I like that you said that, we're probably not coming out of this unscathed. And the other thing is people have short memories. They really do. Like, even when this kind of stuff happens, if you just, stick to your guns and go along with then something else will come up and attract their attention. So, you'd hate to see somebody sort of cave in and just deal with it when it would have been okay in 6 months or a year anyway. And that might seem like a long time, but it really isn't in the grand scheme of things when you're talking about potential 13 years in school.
Right. I mean,
kid might
just
have to
think
deal
about, what was the biggest problem you had 5 years ago? Do you even remember? Like, I mean,
I think we're frozen. Is it me frozen? Is she frozen? Uh-oh. Hello? I'm not sure what's going on. Are we both frozen? You guys, is it just her? Is it she froze? Okay. I don't know what happened. Let me see if I can reach her. Okay. Let's see. I'm going to take her out of the stream and try to put her back in and see what happens. Okay. Still frozen. And now she's not there at all. Something is amiss. Uh-oh. That's bizarre. Okay, just Nicole she's back in there, but she's completely frozen. And now she's gone. I think she's logging back in because she's literally gone from the studio. So she'll be back. Do you guys have questions for her? Because so she's gonna come back in. I think she probably had to like do something with her computer or something with the internet. But do you guys have questions for her when she gets back? or anything. Yeah, I wonder if someone's messing with their ISP. That is kind of scary. I will tell you this, that if it were to happen to anyone, it could be her, because she is very much on their radar and they have been messing with her left and right. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. I think it might be something I think it might be something to do with her internet, because I just tried to message her and I'm not even getting a response back. Uh-oh. All right, so when she comes back, we will ask her that. All right. So, but I did want to mention that if anybody is just arriving, that her way of doing this, in my opinion, is, for lack of a better description, the right way. The right way. You guys who follow me know that I've been pretty down on the going to the school board and yelling into the microphone way. Unless you are there to discuss something that is specifically on the agenda at their meeting, like masking or the superintendent's job. Hang on one second. Oh, you're back.
Sorry. Oh my
We
God.
were literally hypothesizing they messed with your ISP, like the unit is shutting it down. So, okay. So there was a question back here. Has Nicole heard of Elena DeVerno's lawsuit in Michigan?
I just read about it this morning.
Okay, so you did.
And I think that's amazing that they can, yeah, so they're suing the state of Michigan because they're saying that they should be able to take their private money for either charter school or private school. And I didn't get to read the actual lawsuit, but I think they're focusing on some amendment that they want to strike down. So, you know, that's a great example of, like, it's a great idea to say your state should let you use your money to go to private school, but you have to look at your own state's, like, you know, exact constitution and what they say about what you're entitled to in your education. So yeah, that Michigan suit is exciting.
Yeah. And I mean, that's a really good point too, that you do have to, before even going through the process that Nicole went through, I would say go familiarize yourself with your state constitution, what it says about education, what it provides for, because you may be surprised. You may find some good nuggets in there that are there, like in Michigan, or you might realize, oh my gosh, my hands are really tied in ways that you didn't realize. And hopefully that will motivate you to look for candidates who will help get rid of those things, right? But, you know, kind of know what the law is in your state, right? That's a good place to start, and then go forward, as well as federal laws, and then go forward with this process that you followed. Now, in terms of parental rights in general with regard to education, what have you learned through this process that you didn't know before? Was there anything that you learned that you didn't know before?
In general, I learned that schools don't really know their own laws that they have to comply with. And that if they do know, they pretend that they don't know. An example is there's a federal law called PPRA. I forgot exactly what it stands for. Do you remember?
I think it's the Pupil Privacy something, like, Records Act or something.
Yeah, and so that says that a school cannot give a child a survey that is of a personal nature, so asking about your sex, your gender.
Protection of Pupil Rights Amendment. That's what it is. Protection of Pupil Rights Amendment. Yeah.
Right. So they can't give your kids these surveys without your consent, but they're doing it. And if they do that, you can file a complaint with the Department of Education, the federal level. I don't know where that's going to go because I haven't done it yet, but one way that you can sort of stop the lifeblood of all of this equity, diversity, inclusion baloney is by opting out of these surveys. Because what's happening is schools are mining for data in order to say, well, you know, we have all these kids saying things about their race and gender, which now justifies us bringing in all of these equity consulting groups to solve a problem that wasn't there until we took surveys giving us data that are now making it seem like we have a problem.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
They're also selling the data to third parties.
Yeah, right. Now, so number one, they can't do it without your consent. If you find out, file a complaint and then get legal advice. And number two, you can opt out of it altogether. There may be specific ways that you have to opt out in your state, so you have to look that up. But you can start out this is just me talking like a mom. I'm not talking as an attorney here. You can start out by send an email to everyone in your school, your teacher, superintendent, school committee, and be like, I opt out of all surveys. And then get a piece of paper, have it be a neon piece of paper, and say, you know, I'm the mom, this is my kid, they're not to take any surveys without my consent ever. Here's my signature. I want this placed in their education file. I want you to stamp it received so we all know that you have it received. I want a copy of it. So you really have to be, you know, a detailed investigator here when you want to make sure that you're achieving what you want to achieve. And then say to them, is there anything else I have to do to opt out? You tell me the process. How do I opt out of these surveys? And get it in writing. So that way, if they tell you the wrong process, well, now they're on the line and they still have to opt you out of all these surveys.
This is such an important point, and I want everybody to know, because I did look it up, that it is part of the part of the amendment states that every state must have a policy and set of procedures for opting out. They can't not have one. So they're supposed to have one at least at the state level. Very often down at the district level, they have one that's much more precise, but they take great pains to hide it. And very often, I would say 90% of the time, the people at the district level don't know where it is. So good luck to you finding it. But you need to go find what it is and do what she said, because proactively at the beginning of every single year, maybe even, you know, getting all the signatures and everything and making it clear the time period it's for. Okay. So that they can't claim like, oh, well, that was last semester, or that was last week, or that was this class. Make it crystal clear what you're saying and how all encompassing it is, because they are using these surveys with younger and younger children. They're doing them electronically. So they're capturing, and they're using tricks like using radio buttons, which makes it impossible for the child to not select an answer. So if you come to a thing about, for example, pronouns, I've heard about this, where if the student doesn't even know what pronouns are, there's no other, there's no prefer not to say, they have to choose one before proceeding to the next question. And they make these things required. And before you even know what happened, it's happened. Right. They're baking them into English class, art class, health class. They're putting them all over the place and calling it part of the curriculum. So take heed of what Nicole said and absolutely do it. I do want to get to this super chat from Jeff. Thank you, Jeff, for your super chat. It says, she is now on the list of my heroes. Of late, I've never been so disappointed. But then again, expectation is the mother of disappointment. I expected others to stand up. My bad. Well, maybe not my bad. Thank you, Nicole. So I think he speaks for many, many, many millions of us who are very quiet. I'm not quiet, but others are. That, you know, you are an example to follow, and you're giving people great advice. So I hope everybody's taking notes here. This is you. How often do you have free legal advice, right? From someone who is actually
it's not legal advice.
I'm sorry, YouTube. Not legal advice. Not legal advice. It is it's parent advice. Parenting advice. Yes, it's parenting advice from someone who has been through it and through the process. My bad. Sorry, YouTube. Not legal advice. But still, it's excellent free advice. So do that with the surveys. And yes, it is happening everywhere. It is even happening in private schools, but a lot less. Where things are happening more in private schools is the diversity, equity, inclusion training. But the SEL seems to be like a big thing in public school.
Yeah,
much bigger.
I just started learning about that with a woman named Jennifer McWilliams. She's in Indiana. I don't know if you've heard of her. You would actually love talking to her. She's on Twitter with an organization called Purple for Parents Indiana. She is a public school teacher. She used to be a public school teacher. She got fired because she criticized the SEL, social emotional learning program, at her school on her own time, on her own personal social media, and her school fired her. Now she has a First Amendment lawsuit against her school district because she was legally exercising her First Amendment right. And she now has so much information about social emotional learning. I actually talked to her on the phone, and I'm going to be posting some videos I did to help other people get this information too. But social emotional learning is the vehicle for critical race theory. So when you ask your school, are you teaching critical race theory, and they say no, don't underestimate their ability to be like petty tricksters. They're saying, well, we don't teach critical race theory because we don't have a course on critical race theory, but they are teaching the principles and tenets of critical race theory through social emotional learning. And social emotional learning you can talk about for a long time, but in a nutshell, it is a philosophy that says in order for students to learn in school, everyone has to feel safe. Well, feeling safe means we have to deconstruct all of our identities and determine who has power and privilege based on our immutable characteristics. And we're only going to be safe if we rank ourselves according to a new social caste of power and privilege of the oppressed and the oppressor, because the oppressed don't feel safe in school. So now we need to give kids mindsets about how your friend isn't safe because they're a different color than you, but you're safe because you have power and privilege. And now we have to socially engineer our conduct and our curriculum and our policies. So social emotional learning and CRT, they're one and the same. And the school is just using a semantic game to trick you into believing that it's not critical race theory.
It's also a way to get people to oppress themselves. So in other words, like if you're legally precluded as a school from segregating the students, from unequally distributing resources and all kinds of things because of equal protection, but you persuade the students at a young enough age that that they shouldn't want those things, they don't need those things, they have privilege, they are safe already, and they voluntarily give up those rights passively, form affinity groups, or simply get up and leave the library because somebody else wants the table or whatever. You can't accuse them of violating anybody's rights because your kid volunteered to be subservient or, is being a bully, but you can't blame them for being a bully because that other person said, oh, please, by all means, bully me, So it is a kind of mind virus that they're trying to put into your child's head.
It's a mindset that they're trying to implement. And it is very cultish. My school has an advisory group, and I read they did an interview like locally with my local media where they said, well, one person from this group said, well, people don't know who they really are unless they trace their ancestry back to like a slave owner or someone who was racist. So people don't know who they really are unless you like do this incredibly psychologically unhealthy exercise.
Right.
And now they want to teach kids that, well, who you really are, your true identity is, deconstructed under the lens of anti-racism. That's who you really are. So, I mean, that's just mind blowing to me that they want to tell your kids who they are. Right. Cults do that. Cults break down your identity in order to rebuild your identity and make your identity dependent on their dogmas.
And the group.
The
group. Because that's how they discipline you. So the way that you get disciplined in a cult is with shaming and silent treatment and being ostracized or excluded. So in order to have you be susceptible to the threat of exclusion, they have to teach you that inclusion is everything.
Right.
That being accepted by the group is everything, that you as an individual cannot survive. And that's also why they go with younger and younger children, because not only are younger and younger children pre-rational, literally their brains are not developed to think critically about these issues, but they are physically vulnerable and know that they are. If there's one thing small children are, aware of both consciously and subconsciously, is that they're physically vulnerable and dependent on others.
Right. And sorry, go ahead.
No, that's it. I mean,
yeah. And when you go for someone's identity, like that's why people don't leave cults, because like they don't know who they are if they leave the cult. So it is really scary that schools want to.
It's also why people don't leave abusive relationships.
Right.
So abusers on the individual level do the same thing. You will see these same behaviors. In fact, what I find really fascinating is I know a bunch of people. I used to run a support group for people who'd been through those kinds of experiences as individuals. And I've kept in touch with many of them, and they saw through this garbage like before anybody else. Sort of like if you have been through it and come out the other side, where you recognize the speaking patterns and the kind of ways of thinking and manipulations, gaslighting, straw manning, all these things, you see it and you're like, oh, hell no. Like you're not doing that. And now we're trying to like educate everybody else and say, this is an abusive relationship. Your child is basically going into an abusive relationship that is also a cult, like will result in them joining a cult.
Yes, it is absolutely child abuse. It's child abuse to tell a little kid that their skin color defines them, that their sex defines them. I mean, that's such a depressing, dehumanizing ideology. You know what?
Determinism. It's determinism. It's also anti-science. The very same people who shun any kind of IQ testing or testing for anything other, the idea that there is something to the nature argument. In other words, there's nature and nurture, and we don't exactly know if it's equal, but there is a nature component to academic prowess and achievement and so forth, and intellectual capacity. It's not a value judgment, just is. Okay. The same people say, no, we're dealing with tabula rasa. Everybody can learn, and achieve to the same level. And there is no such thing as giftedness. Those same people who want to deny that will turn around and tell you that there's something called genetic trauma. That from 400 years ago in your DNA, that something happened to you and you're carrying that around today. That same people who deny that there's such a thing as IQ.
The hypocrisy and their ability to move the goalpost it has no bounds.
None.
And, I think it is effective to point out the hypocrisy to people that don't see it yet, but I don't think it's effective to point out the hypocrisy to the other side, because I think they know that they're being dishonest. They just want, power. They don't want consistency, and they don't care.
Or they are actually in the cult. So you can't really reason with someone who's abandoned reason. The best hope you have is to go on with life. And, it's sad and that's part of why we have to protect our children so fiercely, is that once they get sucked into this, it can be very hard even for their parents to reach them. And I have people writing to me every day, my college freshman or my high school senior, kids who are advanced into this, they won't speak to me. They are, calling me names, all kinds of negative things that can get actually really scary if they want to start getting into like, we're going to call the cops on you or whatever. We talk about people like not getting the V, for example, and their kids are against them because the teacher said, and now mom's a bad guy. It's very hard to deprogram someone. Parents who had kids go into cults learned this. Parents who had kids get sucked into drug abuse learned this. Bad relationships, all these things. And now we're dealing with it because of the schools. And so the earlier you can get between your kid and these bad ideas, the better you can protect their developing mind.
Yeah, because I remember being a teenager and thinking my teachers were way cooler than my mom and dad. And when you're a teenager, you want legitimacy, you want to be establishing your individuality. And then you have these people who are political ideologues that are taking advantage of those very vulnerable minds that, want to be proving themselves to society. And, let's not forget how seductive this Marxist ideology is, because it makes you believe that you are the hero of your own story, that you're fighting for the little guy who's oppressed. And we all want to feel that important. So it's really just so terrible that these people will indoctrinate kids that way. It's important, I think, to learn about all different government systems. We can teach about communism and Marxism, but we can't teach it as if, that is what we should do. That's the difference.
Right.
I was actually talking like a long time ago in a Facebook forum with a high schooler who seems to be indoctrinated. And I said, I don't think you understand how profoundly political public school is. And her response is, what are you talking about? It's just school. Like, what politics? And I thought, that's what I'm talking about. All of your teachers and mentors there, they're not telling you about the teachers union. They're not telling you about their SEL curriculum. Wow. And that's terrible. So terrible, because kids can learn it. Kids should know the politics of the school that they're in when they're in high school. You're old enough then.
Right. And it's somebody said, I was just listening to somebody yesterday say it's hard to see the picture when you're inside the frame.
Yeah.
And that's also, I think, why it's been hard for parents to see what's happening. There's this paradox where everybody knows, especially today, you'd be hard pressed to find a parent who doesn't feel like something's really wrong with public education, even if they disagree on the particulars. But there's also no institution in our country that people defend more. Defend the existence of it, defend the funding of it, demand more funding without question. Like, they'll readily buy the argument that it's bad because it's underfunded, which is just objectively ludicrous. And it's very strange to me. It's like, what? I can't find any other institution that people are so quick to defend like it's their very baby, while at the same time saying, oh God, it's just terrible and broken and things are bad about it, but we can't possibly give it up. And I'm like,
Yeah,
okay.
it's a really like intellectually lazy position, I think, because it feels very good to just say, of course we fund it. It's education and it's kids, save the children. But if you're not going to really be looking into the mechanics behind public school, you don't really have a compelling argument when you just say, but the kids, but education.
Right.
It's more than that.
Exactly. And so I think we have all done, and certainly you have done a fantastic job of exposing one of the main things that's wrong: the lack of transparency, lack of accountability, the barrier that children and their parents are not the clients of the public system. They're the products of it, if anything, or they're sort of a commodity to be traded in this weird market. But what what do you think we should be fighting for, in terms of, because I get that a lot of people say it's real easy to be against things and what you're against, and I agree. I think we need to start giving equal airtime to the better ideas, the better suggestions of how to educate our kids. Do you think we should have a parallel institution, or do you think can we reform this, or should we just start building
Yeah,
something better?
I don't think we can reform it. There are just so many layers and layers of corruption that I just don't think it's salvageable. I think school choice is the answer. I think people should be able to take their tax dollars, have it follow their kid to a school that better suits the needs of their own kids. And that I think that's the answer also, because like everyone can't sue their school in order to make their school be fair to them. That's not realistic. And we're running out of time to have kids be educated. If we keep, like you said, just pushing back against public school and not fighting for something, in the meantime, all of these kids are losing their education. School choice will be criticized forever because they're saying, well, you're taking money away from public school. But don't forget that that's not the end. If public school is losing money, they now have competition and they have to innovate. They have to think of ways to get kids back into public school. Who's to say that your local public school, because it's defined by your community standards, won't be better than the private school and cheaper? So it's a win-win, because over time, the market will kick in and schools are either going to sink or swim. Right. So if people are as passionate about public school as they say they are, then they should put money into innovating ways to keeping the students there that they claim to be so committed to.
I agree. And what do you say to those who say, well, it's going to become a new form of segregation and there'll be, white flight, or there'll be this
we
or that?
Already have it. We already have a classist school system. We already have, kids being forced in private school. We have people leaving it when they can afford it. That's already here.
Right.
So I don't think it's up to the public school system if they want to respond to what parents are saying, and if they want to respond to whatever happens because of school choice. If they're just going to sit here and say, oh, poor me, we're losing money, I guess we're just going to be a failure. Well, it doesn't have to be that way. You just have to work a little harder.
What's your theory as to why they don't? Like, why they're fighting so hard against parents and treating you like the enemy, treating us like the enemy? But do you have a theory?
I think because they have a radical political agenda. I think that for whatever reason, public school is now full of ideologues who see public school as a platform to pound their quasi-religious pulpit. And that's kind of a power trip. And I think that they don't want to give up their power.
Okay. So one way to, and you've experienced it, that going head to head against that power is not really effective, but taking your child and yourself and removing yourself from that setting, because they do lose the money that went with your child, even though you don't get it back. They do lose it because of enrollment.
Right.
That is more effective use of power. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Disenrollment you can use as a form of boycott. Don't forget that Martin Luther King boycotted the buses, right?
Right.
The power of boycotting when you don't like what your government is doing is very, don't underestimate it. Disenroll your kids from public school. Let them know that you are not happy with what they are doing to your kids.
Right. Exactly.
So I think, I know everyone can't do it, but people that can have to.
Right. And I've been telling people, even if you're one of those who can't do it temporarily before the count date when they take the enrollment to apply to the funding formula, because at least then it does hurt them. It does, send a message. And if you could round up a bunch of people to do it simultaneously, it won't be a silent message. You'll be able to do it. And then after you've done it and they've not gotten the money that follows your specific child, or they can't turn you away, you can go right back in, but they'll have a little bit less to spend on all this diversity garbage. And you can take out an ad, do something, public to say, this is why these 50 undersigned parents or 100 people or whatever, this is why we boycotted and made you lose X amount of dollars, because we're sick of it. And while the school itself might not care or might, whatever they'll do, and they can't really hurt you. There's nothing to do about it. It is the formula. The politicians who run for office see you doing that, and I think they're the ones who start to take notice. They start to realize that it's not as cut and dry as, well, I'm in the party that I can always vote for more money, or, I'm in the party that I can always just oppose the schools. Like, whoever's there in power now realizes they're going to have to address this issue, or they're probably not going to get support from a larger and larger group. That's right. Maybe that's the idealist to me talking, but I think that's really the only political power we've got in this.
Yeah. Situation. And, I think that this is a really long fight, and no one tactic is going to be the answer. And some tactics will be more effective than others. But the point is, you have to keep throwing sand in this machine, because it truly is just this freight train coming at everybody. And we need to just keep doing things that you can do to slow it down. Whatever your position is, where you can think of a strategy that, you're doing your part, even if it's just like donating to the Goldwater Institute because you can't do anything. You want to do something to help people that are fighting, then, you have to do something like now.
Exactly. And so that brings us kind of towards the end of our talk. And so tell me what you are doing next. Like, what are you focusing on now? I know you're kind of still finishing up with this whole lawsuit thing, whatever, but you've established yourself really well as a great voice for this cause. Do you have things on your agenda or things you want to be focusing on? What are you doing next?
Yeah. So right now, I'm sure you can tell, I'm spending a lot of time on social media, continuing to, expose what I can, especially with information from my public records requests. I'm networking more with other groups who have a lot of resources, and I'm hoping that I can use my social media platform to amplify them. Because, when you have these groups that have all this information, you don't want to reinvent the wheel. It's like, just make friends with someone who already did all this work and then push it out, so I don't know if I'm just going to, be more of a amplifier for other people if I keep getting more followers, or maybe, once this lawsuit is tossed out, I can think about maybe having my own organization and how I can help parents. So, right now I'm kind of in this in-between state, but I'm going to keep going because this is important. And, I didn't plan any of this, but now that I'm in this position, I want to make sure I don't lose it.
Right. As I talked to Jody Stone yesterday, and she was in a similar situation. She's like, I'm kind of an accidental advocate, like, I didn't really plan this. I think we're seeing a lot of people in that situation, but if history is riddled with that. With some of the most effective people who were, fighting for change were people who didn't set out to do it. And then you see the people who are setting out to do it, and many of them have been effective, but we don't really remember them all that well, do we? Do, but anyway, I think you're amazing, and I'm so grateful that you came and talked to us and gave us so many good ideas. So just to recap for those of our listening, start with the process, ask questions. Are these ideas being taught? What's going on? Start at your school. If you don't get specific, clear answers, then you go up the food chain, or if you have to file requests, and just understand that you may not like the answers to the questions if you get them, because there is no piece of paper, there's no policy, there's no law that says they can't teach critical race theory. Even if there's a ban in your state, if it's in the teacher's head, it's in the teacher's head. And then the second thing is, before you this day is over, if you have a child in public school, go find the process for opting out of surveys and follow that process. If you cannot find it and a phone call doesn't result in a link or an answer to where it is, take a piece of neon paper, like she said, and write up your own. My child is not to answer any. Go look at the PPRA. That's what it's called, PPRA. You just Google it, and it's out on the government website. Find out what it is and what kind of questions. Right, they are not to do any surveys without my permission. Period. For this, the entire school year. Sign it. Ask for a response and so forth. Do what she said, and just stay on top of this stuff, because there are certain things they can't do, and then there's certain things they can do. So you're going to have to be mindful and watchful. And SEL is the big threat. They can tell you all day long, we don't do critical race theory, but if they're doing SEL, which they usually are very proud to broadcast. So if you go to the district's website, right, and you type in SEL, you're likely to find it. You're likely to find it either they use programs by Castle or by, I think it's called Panorama Ed, are the two biggest companies. If you see those in your district, that's what it is what she's talking about, that cultish deconstruction of boundaries. So thank you so much, Nicole, for coming on. And everybody, you can follow Nicole at her Twitter handle right there at Nicoletta0602. And please consider a donation to the Goldwater Institute. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Have a great afternoon.